Welcome to week 8. This week we're talking about differentiating your instruction to all your students because as anyone who's ever been in a classroom knows and understands fully, every child is at a different place in their learning, and we need to be responsive to children in all of their various where they are in their learning, and make sure that we're challenging them, that we're keeping them in their zone of proximal development, and assisting and scaffolding as needed. So how do we do that? And what is differentiated instruction? Differentiated instruction is based on the premise that instructional approaches should vary and be adapted in relation to individual and diverse students. It's a process in which teachers enhance learning by matching student characteristics to instruction and assessment. Differentiated instruction allows all students to access the same classroom curriculum by providing entry points, learning tasks, and outcomes that are tailored to students' needs and not just the entire group. Differentiated instruction is not one single strategy, but rather an approach to instruction that incorporates a variety of strategies. Teachers can differentiate content, process, and/or product for students. Differentiation of content refers to a change in the material being learned by a student. For example, if the classroom objective is for all students to subtract using renaming, some of the students may learn to subtract 2-digit numbers, while others may learn to subtract larger numbers in the context of word problems. Differentiation of process refers to the way in which a student accesses material. One student may explore a learning center, while another student collects information from the World Wide Web. Differentiation of product refers to the way in which a student shows what he or she has learned. For example, to demonstrate understanding of a geometric concept, one student may solve a problem set, while another builds a model. When teachers differentiate, they do so in response to a student's readiness, interest, and/or learning profile. Readiness refers to the skill level and background knowledge of the child. Interest refers to the topics that the student may want to explore or that will motivate the student. This can include interests relevant to the content area as well as outside interests of the student. Finally, a student's learning profile includes learning style. Example, maybe the child is a visual learner or an auditory learner, or maybe tactile and kinesthetic, or the grouping preferences as well. So are we doing small group, individual, or large group? And environmental preferences. Do we have lots of space or a quiet area to work? A teacher may differentiate based on any one of these factors or any combination of factors. Well, how do we do it? Implementation looks different for each student and each assignment. Before beginning instruction, teachers should do 3 things. Use your diagnostic assessments to determine student readiness. These assessments can be formal or informal. Teachers can give pre-tests. They can question students about their background knowledge, or they can use the KWL charts that ask students to identify what they already know, what they want to know, and what they have learned about a topic. We should also be determining student interest. This can be done by using interest inventories and/or including students in the planning process. An interest inventory is just a sheet of paper where the child tells you what they like to do. And you can have a reading interest inventory, you can have a science interest inventory. Like, what are you interested in? Do you like to do these? Do you like to read these types of books? Do your parents read to you? What kind of characters do you identify with? That type of thing. So again, doing student interest inventories and including students in the planning process. I think that's a really key component to this. Make sure that you are planning with your students and identify the learning targets and say, okay, this week our goal is we are going to be learning how to read our sight words. So let's think of some ways we can do that, and let's write them down in our work plan and have the child there with you while you're creating that work plan so that they are a part of it. Teachers can also ask students to tell them what specific interests they have in a particular topic And then the teachers can try to incorporate those interests into their lessons. So if children are really into sharks, let's say, well, gosh, let's find some cool beginning reader books about sharks. And voila, now you have used that child's interest to create a learning opportunity. Also, identify student learning styles and environmental preferences. Some children really focus on learning to spell words by moving. So I've had carpet squares out where there's different letters painted on them, and children can spell words using the carpet squares, and they jump from letter to letter. Or they're on a mini trampoline and they're spelling words while jumping. There's lots of fun ways to make sure that you are respecting and honoring their learning style if they're, for instance, a kinesthetic learner. Teachers can also get information about student learning styles by asking students how they learn best and by observing student activities. Identifying environmental preferences include determining whether students work best in large or small groups and what environmental factors might contribute to or inhibit student learning. For example, a student might need to be free from distraction or have extra lighting while he or she works. I know that some of my students really need quiet in order to focus, and so I do have a bin of noise canceling headphones that they can put on so that they can work in a more cocoonish environment. And other kids, they just love to shout at each other as they're learning. They play games and they're just like yelling from person to person, which is not my learning style, but it's theirs. I try to inhibit that as much as I can. So teachers incorporate different instructional strategies based on the assessed needs of their students. Throughout a unit of study, teachers should assess students on a regular basis. I feel like assessment, and we'll be talking about that next week, has to happen constantly. You're constantly assessing your students by playing games, by your transition activities, through your songs, out on the playground. Today we did a hangman exercise, and then at the end, this is differentiation, my beginning readers had to point to all the sight words they could find. Then I turned the board around, and my intermediate readers, I asked them to spell the sight words, which is another step above. And then my advanced readers, I asked them to spell the non-sight words, the hard words that were in the sentence that we chose to do for our hangman exercise. And so right there, that's a transition activity. I was able to do, boom, 3 different levels. And this was just as they went out to go get their shoes on and get ready to go home. And it took all of 5 minutes. So that's a really quick way to do your informal assessing when you're in the grade school arena, sorry. So what does it look like for reading? Differentiation strategies applied to reading can be designed to help students learn a range of skills, including phonics, comprehension, fluency, word prediction, and story prediction. The strategy of tiered assignments are, so you can use one strategy, which is tiered assignments. And tiered assignments are designed to instruct students on essential skills that are provided at different levels of complexity, abstractness, and open-endedness. The curricular content and objectives are the same, but the process and product are varied according to the student's level of readiness. For example, students with moderate comprehension skills could be asked to create a story web. Students with advanced comprehension skills could be asked to retell a story from the point of view of the main character. So for instance, today we had 2 students come and join us that are normally in a different class, and we are reading a Roald Dahl book, The Witches. And so I used today as an example on how to give a book report, because we needed to catch our 2 new students up to be able to have them understand what was happening in the chapter that I was reading today. So I stood up and I said, okay, boys and girls, this is perfect opportunity. You're going to be giving book reports here pretty soon. I'm going to give you an example of how to do it. This is an oral book report, not a written book report, because some kids need to do it orally. And so I showed all of my students how to stand up in front of the class and give a synopsis of what is happening in the book. Who's the main character? What's the plot? Who are the other characters? What's happened so far? What's the setting? Where are they? And all of that. So my students got a firsthand lesson today on a way to do a book report. I will be giving them written examples as well. And for students who need even extra help, they might just draw pictures and show beginning, middle, end. So another strategy for differentiating reading readiness or differentiating reading is compacting. Compacting is the process of adjusting instruction to account for prior student mastery of learning objectives. So compacting involves a 3-step process. Number 1, you assess the student to determine his or her level of knowledge on the material to be studied and determine what he or she still needs to master. Second step, create plans for what the student needs to know and excuse the student from studying what he or she already knows. And then 3, create plans for freed up time to be spent in enriched or accelerated study. I'll give you an example. A student who can decode words with short vowel sounds would not need to participate in a direct instructional lesson for that skill, but might be provided with small group or individualized instruction on a new phonics skill. So if I'm doing short A, then, and I've got some of my students who have graduated out of our beginning reader club, that's what we call our emergent readers, is the beginning reader club. So if I've got students who have moved out of that, I'm not going to force them to come back and have lessons on short A vowel sounds and learn how to read like cat and mat and pan and man and words like that. I'm going to start getting them going on new digraphs. Maybe they're doing CH beginning sounds or SH beginning sounds. So we would do a bunch of words that start or end in SH or CH. Or perhaps I need to get them going on words that end in AKE. So rake, cake, make, bake, things like that. So you have to know where your students are. As one of my great teachers said, you have to know your customer. You want to know where your student is so that you're not boring them. A perfect example is one of my students one year. In Montessori, you have your students for a long time, and I have moved up with a lot of my students since they were 2. So a few of my students who are now in 5th grade, they're no longer with me. They have a new teacher now, but it's the first time ever since they were 2.5 years old. I was in the preschool room with them. When they moved into elementary, that's when I also moved into the elementary classroom. Then they were with me, and last year we had up through 4th grade in our elementary. So literally, they have been with me since they were 2.5 through 4th grade. So of course, I'm going to recycle topics, especially science. So we were studying the water cycle, and for one of my students, it was his 3rd time doing it. And he got very frustrated with one of my assessments, and he wrote all over it, "I've done this a million times. I already know this. This is boring. I don't want to do this anymore." That was a great lesson for me to make sure that I compact my lessons when I am dealing with a student who has done this before. Don't make him do everything all over again. That's just mean. Another strategy is to make interest centers or interest groups. Interest centers, especially used with younger students, and interest groups, which are usually used with older students, are set up so that learning experiences are directed toward a specific learner interest. So allowing students to choose a topic can be motivating to them. So, for example, we expect our children to do research projects. And they can choose for, let's say we're going to do a research project on an animal. They can choose whichever animal they want to do it on. I'm not going to tell them, okay, this month we're all going to be learning about alpacas. No, I will let them choose what they want to choose. So interest centers can focus on specific reading skills. So again, let's use a research project on animals. You would supply them with books, especially nowadays since we don't have libraries that are open. You would have to supply books for them, and you would have to supply vocabulary. That would be your job. You would provide examples and activities that center on a theme of interest. So for interest, for example, we have animals here on our campus, and children can choose these animals that we have already, and we have lots of books on them, or they can choose animals that they are interested in, and then they can do research. So you wouldn't want to give them the opportunity to do some research on something that they're interested in. You're using that interest part, but then not provide them with enough material. So your center needs to be fully fleshed out. For a book report, students could work in interest groups with other students who wanted to read the same book, for example, or study the same animal. We just got a new animal in a new classroom pet in our classroom, and it's an axolotl. So what did I do? As soon as we got our axolotl, I ordered a bunch of books about axolotls because I knew there would be a lot of interest. Children were asking me before the books arrived, can the axolotl walk on water? Can the axolotl have babies? Can the axolotl walk on ground? Can we take the axolotl out of the water? Can we feed the axolotl things other than worms? I didn't know. So I ordered a lot of books, and I'll tell you what, they arrived yesterday, and this morning the children saw them on the table and they were all reading them. In fact, do I have one right here? Yes, here's one right here. One of my third graders came and said, Teacher Kelly, I think you need to make sure and read chapter 2 to the class, because it talked about how axolotls can become very depressed if children are constantly tapping on the aquarium walls. So already my third grader was reading all about the axolotl. And here's a dog-eared page. So it looks like he got this far. Okay, another strategy is flexible grouping. Okay, flexible grouping means children can work as a part of many different groups depending on the task and or content. Sometimes students are placed in groups based on readiness. Other times they're placed based on interest and or learning profile. Groups can either be assigned by the teacher or chosen by the students. Students can be assigned purposely to a group or assigned randomly. This strategy allows students to work with a wide variety of peers and keeps them from being labeled as advanced or struggling. So if you always have all the advanced kids in one group and you always have the strugglers in one group, well, they start self-labeling, even though you haven't labeled them. Maybe you call these guys the bluebirds and these guys are the eagles. They figure it out. They're smart. They know. So mix them up. If you've got eagles and bluebirds and now you want to do a project on axolotls, assign groups randomly. You know, have your poor readers mix with your advanced readers. They can help each other. And the teacher may assign groups based on readiness for phonics instruction while allowing other students to choose their own groups for book reports based on the book topic. Another strategy is to do learning contracts. Learning contracts begin with an agreement between the teacher and the student. The teacher specifies the necessary skills expected to be learned by the student and the required components of the assignment, while the student identifies methods for completing the tasks. This strategy, A, allows students to work at an appropriate pace, B, can target learning styles, and C, helps students work independently, learn planning skills, and eliminate unnecessary skill practice. An example of that is if a student indicates that he or she wants to research a particular author, with support from the teacher, the student determines how the research will be conducted and how the information will be presented to the class. For example, the student might decide to write a paper and present a poster to the class. The learning contract indicates the dates by which each step of the project will be completed. We studied Native Americans last year, Native American culture last year, and we had our older students, they teamed up together to create dioramas and tell us all about a whole tribe, what they ate, how they lived, what they wore, their customs, and they built a diorama of one of their dwellings, and it was fantastic. It was amazing. Another strategy is to create choice boards. Choice boards are organizers that contain a variety of activities. Students can choose one or several activities to complete as they learn a skill or develop a product. Choice boards can be organized so that students are required to choose options that focus on several different skills. So we have something akin to that in our school, and many schools do this too. We have work plans, and there are different ideas for work plans. And right now, this may change, but right now what I do is I write down a list of lots of different things for the children to choose from. So it's basically a choice board, and children have the choice to go and complete materials, working on the materials or creating materials or finishing materials based upon their interest. So I'm utilizing interest, I'm utilizing choice. It's kind of like a learning contract because children know that they can work at their own pace, they can work independently, they can plan, they can target their own learning, they can decide if they want to work with other children, which is flexible grouping. So many of the things, compacting. So if a child has done a lot of the work already, they might say, Teacher Kelly, you wrote on here to do, let's say, adding fractions with like denominators, and that child might say, I feel like I already know how to do this, so I don't really want to do this again. And then I have to decide, okay, do I want to make sure that that child can prove it to me? Do I want to give him a little assessment in order to make me feel comfortable that he's ready to move on? Or should I take him at his word? That's where compacting comes in. And tiered assignments. It's all the same. Doing your own work plan is tiering a child, because as the teacher, I should know where my students are, and I'm already tiering them. So tiering, compacting, interest centers or interest groups, flexible grouping, learning contracts, and choice boards. Those are all ways that we can ensure that we're differentiating among our different learners and where they are in their learning. So I will put together some more videos for you to watch to maybe give you some better ideas of how public schools do it. Public schools do differentiated instruction far differently than Montessori schools. I think they're both valid and they both work really well. All right, I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you. Bye.